Hello team. So it's Saturday, it is 12:30 UK time, and it is time for our leadership surgery. So my name is Alice Bromwich. I run Empowering Success, and so we deal with leadership, resilience, business growth, developing your performance. And every Saturday, obviously, I do a quick session exploring what are the topics that have come up this week. And so, hey, Jim, how are you? So that you guys can do a bit of a Q&A. If there's any questions you want to ask, or if there's any comments you want to make about things that have been going on in your life over the last week, so we can have a bit of interaction as far as what's coming up for you and similarly, what are the trends that I'm seeing. So you're probably going, why this week am I stood in a graveyard? Well, the reason why, and the topic which we've put up for this week to explore, is about burnout. Because essentially, if we get burnout, you're pretty much dedicating yourself to an early grave. And I hate to be quite so, brutal and harsh about it, but that's the reality. Is at the moment, I'm seeing a lot of people who are really exhausted. And as some of you guys will know, is that I'm ex-military. And so we're kind of used to deploying an operation, so kind of 6 months at a time. Some people will go up to 8 months, some people on to a year, but it's a very kind of rhythmical cycle. And although you're going to be surging really hard and working really, all hours that God sends, it always has an end in sight. And I'm currently doing a crisis leadership course with Harvard at the moment. And hey, Emma. The really interesting piece of that is, so I'm there as a kind of adjudicator and to be able to help look at the course and give them some, explore with some of the guys of developing it with a bit of a European flair as well. And one of the things that's been so fascinating this week is that essentially all of those crisis responders that I'm on the course with are all talking about when the pandemic ends. And I'm just thinking, have I missed something? This isn't going to end. It's going to evolve, but it's not the same as when sometimes you might go on an operational tour, or you might get surged in to kind of do cover for somebody when they've been sick, or that there's a specific piece of a business that needs to be a change program. This is going to be an evolution. And one of the really interesting things that came up was that essentially people are shattered. That adrenaline, that kind of surging on, you're on purpose, you've got your focus about getting your team through the next few months and making sure everyone's going as strong as they can. But that's exhausting. And so then the next stage of that is, are you pacing yourself? And so what people are seeing essentially, definitely stateside, and what's been really interesting here is, arguably we're probably a few months ahead given our second lockdown, etc., and the American elections coming up. But is that they're already seeing some of their teams breaking. And definitely for me, that's what I've seen even amongst our own team. Just going to perch on the side here. It's what I've seen for our own team as well, is that actually as different members of their families have got sick, or as they might have lost members of their families too, is that the energy, the emotional energy they have to put into work is also changing. So, for example, now we're about to bring on a third member of the team this week, which is great. But everyone seems to want to work around kind of 15, 20 hours a week, which I'm finding fascinating as far as this will now be the third person we've taken on that we were exploring taking on a full-time person, but actually they've gone, no, with my family commitments, with the other pieces that are going on in life, actually this is what I think I can cope with, and this is where I know I can offer my skills in well. So I think there's an interesting change in dynamic here too of people's expectations in the workplace if they're coming to work as part of your team. And I chatted to one of our relations who runs a big business over in Australia this morning, and he said very similar, is that, people are being far more, they've had lots of latitude, lots of flexibility during lockdown to actually work out how they want their lives to be led and how they want to be integrating work and home, even though you're in the same building potentially. So for you as a leader, how is that going to be affecting you? Well, for me, for example, I tried to take last weekend off because you saw we went to go and do the recce's over in the Outer Isles. But it also meant that I was then having to navigate between different members of staff on different tasks all the way through the weekend because we didn't have the consistency. So for you as a leader, or for me as a leader, that then meant I didn't actually get the kind of downtime that I would be wanting to create for others. So that was really helpful, as far as it was a recce for the resilience retreat, but it was also meant to be therefore be an opportunity for me to get some downtime, some headspace. And by having multiple short-term members of staff, it was really interesting. There's far more churn than I've had in the past. So a very different dynamic for myself. And that seems to be as different people are then either getting COVID or they're having to deal with different aspects in their families and different illnesses, naturally coming into autumn in the northern hemisphere. We often have a lot of flu and other sickness that might well be going round. And it's just looking at, are you setting yourself up to survive and thrive, or are you setting yourself up to potentially burn out and fail? And what I'm having to say to quite a lot of the guys, ladies and men within that sphere, is that you're no use to anyone if you're broken. You're no use to anyone if you've already fallen over. And so hence for us, this is why we're now looking at taking on a third person, potentially a fourth, is because I don't want any members of my team to break. And when they've turned around and said, well, Alice, I can't do as many hours as I know you need, I think I should, hand in my notice. I'm like, no, let's look at what you can do and move from there forward. But I think this is us as leaders, we have to really explore too, is how can we be more dynamic with our teams and the team development to ensure they don't burn out? Because if you're looking after your team, God willing, your team will be looking after you in the business. But also is that you're giving yourself enough flex, that you've also got a team that's strong and resilient around you. So you're not going to end up in here in an early grave because you're trying to cover everything. So interestingly, even little things like now setting up an onboarding process is, one of my tasks for this week. So let alone bringing on more clients and things like that, is actually a staff onboarding process to remove the churn for us. So that again, we're creating more consistency. And the more consistency you've got, the more peace of mind you can have. And that then enables you to open up from that kind of fight, flight or freeze and go, okay, let's get back into the problem solving, that really logical space. Give yourself some headspace, some latitude to be able to explore where you need to be going. So over the last few months, obviously, I've been continually peddling the same theme, which is looking out further, looking up into the sky. Where's your blue sky thinking? Where's our blue sky? One might ask. Bit behind me, I think. There we go, tiny little bit behind me, with the Scottish flag too. But, so where's your blue sky thinking? Where's your space to still strategically plan? Now, back at the change of the solstices, I know we chatted about looking over into February. I'm now encouraging people to look to September next year, because that's the reason I'm growing my team now, is because I know where I want to be this time next year. And so unless I'm planning for where I want to be, and you're planning the future from the future, we're only ever going to be in this little kind of quagmire or the hamster wheel of going round and round and round. There's an amazing local business up here in the Highlands, and the business owner has always been someone that people go to because he's very imaginative, he's very dynamic. And he's had an article in the paper this morning. It's fascinating. He says, right, we're now going to be closing on Sundays, which they've never done before, because we need a day for all of our staff to recover with all of the extra pressure of cleaning everything down, all that kind of stuff. But also he said he's had to evolve his business. He said it felt like every single solitary week. Now for me, that meant I was like, ooh, alarm bells. If you're evolving every week, you haven't got a long-term strategy. Do we have to respond every week? Yes. But that's where for the exhaustion and the burnout, we risk running on adrenaline. And if you're running on adrenaline all the time, you will get to severe physical fatigue. And those cortisol levels that raise when we've got that fight or flight mechanism. And what I'm seeing is those that are really overwhelmed are starting now to want to flee. They're doing the flight, they're not doing the fight. And for you guys to be business leaders that are going to succeed, we have to have some fight left in us. And so from that aspect, is very aware that I've now been chatting for 10 minutes, and I promise to try and keep these short and sweet, is remembering the 80% rule. So when my last tour was in Afghan, and I was working with some of the specialists there, And so that's always where there's a very high tempo of ops, very high tempo of operations. So just like now, you're having to think ahead all the time about what might be happening. But I was running my team hard. We were running hot. And I remember the commander at the time saying, Alice, what are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm absolutely fine. This is great. We're running on the charge of making sure everything's happening. And he said, he goes, what do you think you're running at? And I said, well, we're trying to give you 100%. He said, that's not what I want. And that's my challenge for you. Do you want your team running at 100%? We think we do. I've even said to clients this week, I'm here for you 120%. And I thought, what am I doing? I'm actually going to be now putting myself towards potentially a burnout situation. Whereas in contrast, the boss that was in Afghan with me said, what happens if we have a hostage situation? What happens if we have an aircraft go down? Which is exactly what happened, ironically, whilst I was on leave, unfortunately, and we lost the whole crew. But that then meant we lost expertise. It's no different with COVID. It's no different with the pandemic. You might have somebody who's suddenly out for a couple of weeks, that they get sick, and then they need time to convalesce. It's making sure that the immune systems of ourselves and our staff are firing on all cylinders. So that 80% rule is really, really important. Are you working at 80%? Are your team working at 80%? Are you making sure you've still got some energy left, that you've got something left in the bag to pull out when an unknown factor, another black swan event comes along? So that's my little summary. Any questions from you guys? Jim, Emma, Andy, great to see you. And I can see there's a few others as well, but whose names haven't popped up. Any queries for you from the beautiful Highlands up here with our little Scottish flag behind? Because like I say, unless we're careful, we risk ending up becoming a statistic and being here in this beautiful graveyard in Dorna Cathedral, which is a stunning place, but they haven't even had the cathedral open during COVID. It's just starting to open up again. But take other people that you could take on, even just for a few hours a week. There's so many people out there who, when I've put out a Charlie 1 last week, when I put out a request saying, would anyone like to come and work with us? I had 5 ladies within the hour going, yes, absolutely, would love to, want to have something with purpose to be doing during the pandemic. I'm at home, I'm not at full capacity, can I help? And then when we've explored it, it's that they've got some hours, but not a full-time role. They've got kind of 10, 15, 20 hours. Then start breaking up your tasks so that you can find other people to help you and give yourself some of that time back. So let's watch out this week. Let's not become a statistic. Keep yourselves at 80%. How can you, if you're not there now and you're working at 100 to 120, how can you draw yourself back? I always use the analogy that we need to step up to the plate. Of course, as leaders, that comes without saying. But my goodness, how many of us forget we also have to take a step back? Because we can't keep stepping forward and forward and forward without exhaustion. So if you're stepping forward, when are you giving yourself a chance to take a step back, to recalibrate, to come back to neutral? So you're surging, but back to neutral. Surging, back to neutral, and hitting that 80% so you don't hit burnout and your team doesn't hit burnout. Bless you. Lovely to see you all. And like I say, from beautiful Dorna Cathedral, let's not become a statistic. And let's not hurry to come and join these wonderful souls that are here, however friendly it might appear. Ciao for now.